This is the Sales Whisper Podcast, session 18, Big Ideas for Small Business. Hey everybody, thank you for allowing me to take a week off from the podcast. I was in Austin, Texas and Dallas, went to a little LSU football game up at Jerry Jones Cowboy Stadium. It was quite an impressive building, whether you're a fan or not. And then I hung out with my mom a little bit, saw some friends in Austin, and then attended a 2-day workshop on publishing. So I have a rather brisk agenda plan coming up over the next 6 months to get several more books published. So be on the lookout for that. Today's guest is Barbara Weltman. She is an attorney. She is a prolific author, speaking of authors, with titles such as J.K. Lasser's Small Business Taxes, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Starting a Home-Based Business, and Smooth Failing, which we'll talk about a little bit on the show. But this is where top industry leaders share their secrets for turning pain into profit. Barbara is a trusted professional advocate for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Can I get an amen? She is a guest columnist in the Wall Street Journal. You can see her stuff in U.S. News and World Reports. She contributes to American Express Open, SBA.gov, and Entrepreneur. So on her website, which we'll talk about, but it's barbaraweltman.com, she has an idea of the day and a monthly e-newsletter, Big Ideas for Small Business. So without further ado, here's Barbara. Well, hello, Barbara. Thanks for joining the Sales Whisper podcast today. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for having me.
Are you still back east? You went to college in New York, right?
That's true, but I went to college and I lived my whole life until 3 months ago in New York, and now I've relocated to sunny Florida.
Oh, very nice. All right, so sometimes like Northerners talking to Southerners, you know, they kind of get an attitude with me, but now you're a Southerner. So,
I'm a Southerner,
so
right.
we're kinfolk.
Yeah.
So I ran across your site not too long ago, but I really liked what I saw. I liked your focus. Barbara Weltman, Big Ideas for Small Business. And, you know, those that have listened to my show for a while, they know like the work I've done with Infusionsoft and how really focusing on small business. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. You know, I've had a lot of sales trainers, I've had marketers, social media people, but, you know, business is important, right? And while we help people grow, they still have to dot their I's and cross their T's, right?
Yeah, I focus primarily on tax, financial, and legal issues for small business. And those points are largely overlooked, unfortunately, because we're so busy doing what we do that we don't take the time and give the attention that's needed to these other matters, which basically could put you out of business if you make too many missteps.
Well, when should an entrepreneur start doing that planning? I mean, there's always two sides of the same coin, and I know sometimes maybe we do all the planning, we go get our LLC or our corporation, yada yada. Sometimes though, I'm a doer, right? So I don't always tell people to follow me, but I tell them what I do. And I just went, right? And once I started making more money, I went and incorporated and did all that. And, you know, and I kind of did that too from the advice of a friend of mine that is an accountant. He said, go make money. Go make money, then we'll structure it. So, I mean, what do you tell business owners?
Well, that's fine, and I'm glad that worked out for you. But I think that depending on what you do, you may want to incorporate or form an LLC sooner rather than later and not wait for the money necessarily to roll in because of concerns about personal liability protection. So if you're in a kind of business that involves people who have potential for injury, you run a restaurant, a daycare service, anything that where somebody could slip and fall, eat something bad, you know, you got issues there that, yeah, okay, maybe insurance could address, but you're better safer than sorry by taking those formal steps up front and not waiting till you have the money rolling in.
Right. Well, and that's a good point. I mean, I work from home. I do training and consulting. If I did any training outside, I was at a neutral site. Either they had insurance, or sometimes when I rented a place, they would have me get, insurance for the event or whatever. So, that is an important disclaimer. You don't want to eat what I cook. So I didn't get into that. So I've been safe there.
But I think that that's just one aspect. I think today, a very, very important part of any business is your IP, your intellectual property,
right,
your trade name, your logo, all of that. And you want to get that right from the get-go. You don't want to get started and try to brand yourself under a trademark that somebody else already claimed.
Right.
You can wind up investing a lot of money and effort for nothing, and it could be a very costly mistake. So that's another thing that I think you got to think about right up front. And then I think another issue for small businesses, and it's probably the least pleasant thing to be thinking about, but it's the fact that the government is really your partner in so many ways. The government shares in your profits, obviously, by way of taxes, but it also tells you what to do in terms of regulations for so many activities, requires licensing for so many types of businesses. If you look on the licenses it states, that's how many states make revenue, by charging for licenses and other fees. And so you got to do that right up front. You can't be casual about that.
Right.
If you try to operate without a license and then a customer stiffs you, you'd never be able to collect.
Right. And when I got started, I did file a DBA with my local city. And the one thing that did help me in just getting started, I ran ads, started doing workshops, and I went to file a trademark on the Sales Whisperer, but I waited, right, till I had a little more money, and somebody had filed it. They had filed an intent to use, like literally 30, 45 days before I filed. And fortunately, I had documentation that I was already using the name in commerce. I owned the domain, but it cost me an extra probably $1,500 in attorney's fees filing things back and forth, because they were about to issue it to this guy, and basically he had to relinquish it to me. But because I delayed, that did cost me.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I did a trademark search from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which you can do
for
free. And I was searching for big ideas for small business. It didn't appear to be in use. I started to use it. I had my business cards and brochures. I did everything with it. And then it turned out, I found out that Citibank had trademarked it.
Oh.
And so I had to incur, as you did, legal fees. It had been out of use for a very long time by them, and so there's a process where you post notice, and they didn't reclaim it, and so it became mine. But again, I had to incur fees that, if I had done it right the first way, if I had gone to an attorney right up front, they would have done a more extensive search than available for free. Would have gotten it right, and in the long run would have saved me money.
Right, because, you can start at uspto.gov.
Exactly.
But that's not totally comprehensive.
That's the problem. So these are not do-it-yourself things. And I'm an attorney, but I'm not an IP attorney.
Right.
And I think that's the lesson here, that it pays to invest the dollars, to go to the experts. In the long run, it saves you money, aggravation, time. You can put your time to running your business and let the experts deal with what they know best.
How many people, though, do you see really need a trademark? Like your typical small business.
They may not need a trademark, but they may want to claim a name that's unique or helpful to them. And there are issues involved there, especially if they're going to be incorporating, if they want to use it as a domain name, if they want to use it for Twitter. So it's not like a simple thing where you if I come up with a great name, there's more to it than that. There's a lot that you have to consider and explore.
Right. So you got started at J.K. Lasser's, right?
Right. Right after law school, I started working with J.K. Lasser. We do the big yellow, blue, and red tax guide, and then I went out on my own, and I had my legal practice for many, many years, and I closed my practice maybe about 8 years ago now.
Wow.
To concentrate exclusively on writing and educating the small business community. That the mission statement for my business is to make entrepreneurs smarter.
Right.
And that's what I've been working towards ever since.
So I hate to admit that I was not really familiar with J.K. Lasser, but how they were already a big business when you joined them, right?
Well, they are owned by Wiley Publishing. Before that, they were Simon & Schuster. So they've been with big publishing companies. The book's been in print since 1939 or something like that. So it's just a question of working on that. And now I have a number of titles of my own under the J.K. Lasser imprint. Okay.
So did they just ask you to help update it? How did you get involved in that book?
Yeah, that's the world. It was a whole. They were a group that published a lot of different books and newsletters and other things, all of which I was working on, tax related.
And then you just found you had a proclivity, or you were drawn to writing and training like that?
Exactly. And then I went on with associations with other people that led me to develop continuing education courses for attorneys and accountants, and to speak to the public about small business issues. During the course of my practice, I did a lot of work with small business. I helped with incorporation and buy-sell agreements and shareholder agreements and all kinds of things that come up for small business. And it just became apparent to me that over time, the same questions were raised over and over again, and I tried to address that in what I do now.
So what are some of those same questions that you see come up?
Well, for example, the common question should I be an S corporation? Should I be an LLC? And it's a great question. And, it depends. It just depends on situations, what the business is involved in, what your plans for the future for the business may be, the state that you're in. There are a number of issues. And just to point out that there are similarities between these two types of business entities, and they both give you personal liability protection and are generally similar in how your profits get taxed. But there are considerable differences in terms of your payroll and responsibilities for unemployment insurance and workers' comp for yourself. And so I think that you have to point out the differences and understand the differences so you can make an informed decision.
Do you find business owners are far too optimistic when they start and then too pessimistic when things get tough?
You have to be optimistic when you start. You better be optimistic when you start. What better time to be optimistic than when you start? And that's really, I think, part of the driving force behind so many people today, and why businesses keep cropping up, regardless of the state of the economy, regardless of the obstacles that may be out there in terms of inability to get financing or the lack of reception by the public. I think it's by nature, by definition, that makes you an entrepreneur and wanting to start a business, that you just believe in who you are, what you have to offer, whether it's a product or a service, and you got to go for it.
Well, do you? I agree. I mean, you got to jump in, but do you find? Many people just aren't ready. Maybe they're too optimistic. They jump in, the E-Myth with Michael Gerber. He talks about the 3 different types.
Right.
They're not. Most are doers, right?
Yeah, they're not prepared to run a business.
Right.
To give up the reins of doing to people. They want to keep doing. They want to be, in his book, they want to keep baking those pies, and they don't want to let somebody else do it. Absolutely, you're right. But I think some of the mistakes are, well, it's hard to say. There's so many mistakes. You know, I did write one book that's just out now. It's an ebook. It's called Smooth Failing. Right. Top industry leaders share their secrets for turning pain into profit. And these are top people who have shared really personal catastrophes of their own making to a large extent. Sometimes just being blindsided and unprepared for what happens in the world, and sometimes by being overtaken by your own ego, that letting your own ego, that you know it all, or if things are going along great, they're always going to go along great, and just not having, there's no one error that people make. I probably have made every one that have been identified in the book. And I think anybody who's survived business long enough would probably say that, or admit that they've had a significant number of errors themselves. And, you know, they run the gamut from not understanding things, from not listening to people, from, you know, ignoring reality, you name it. If you could think of it, it's been done.
Do you think, is there a common thread, though? Because we see the statistics, you know, whatever, 80% of businesses fail in the first year or whatever, 96% of businesses fail by the year 5 or whatever. Did they just get in over their heads, or did they try to do too much? Would they not outsource? Is it not embracing sales and marketing? I mean, is there like a common?
No, and that's the thing. I don't think there is a common thing. I think there is so many potential catastrophes. There are so many things that could happen to derail you. I think, for example, I mean, look, in terms of, if you look at the statistics, about the same number of businesses start each year as fail each year. But many of the businesses that fail don't necessarily fail. They often morph into something else. They may go in a completely different direction. So they're not really the same business, but the business owner is still at it. It's been said that cash flow can be your undoing, that if you don't watch your cash flow so that you have the funds available to pay when your bills come in, that can put you out of business quickly. And certainly I've seen it I've seen it numerous times, especially businesses that are getting a cash crunch. Maybe they have all these, they're making the sales, they're generating the invoices, but they're just not bringing in the cash fast enough to meet their obligations.
Right.
And, you know, that really can put you under. And then one of the potential dangers there is business owners may use the money that they've withheld from employee paychecks to cover withholding and employee share of FICA to pay a vendor or to pay the landlord or to pay the utility bill rather than to pay the government, which they should be doing with the money. So then they become on the hook personally for these taxes. Right. And then they keep getting farther and farther and farther behind the 8 ball because of it.
Should entrepreneurs hire family members?
Yes and no. It depends on the family members. I think you got to recognize the pros and cons. I think nepotism is a great thing in the right situation because you have a lot of trust. You know who the person is, and I've seen a lot of successful family businesses without too much difficulty, as long as they've established ground rules, meaning that family members are treated no better or worse than non-family members. They have to abide by the same rules. You know, they can't be coming in late if you oppose a time for everybody else to show up. Mm-hmm. But you have to recognize that it doesn't always work out. You got to sit down at Thanksgiving table with these people after firing them. It could be very challenging to do that. And so if both parties understand what the possible risk is going in, look, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to have to let you go. Just understand that, and don't expect to be crowned a prince here just because you're related to me. You have to work as hard as everybody else, and you're only going to get paid as much as I would pay any unrelated person. Then I think you got a shot at making it work. And as I said, there's a lot of pluses to it. I know many people, many spouses who work together and it works out. I know many people who brought in children, and especially at a young age, the children have grown up in the business, taken over, and it's worked out very well.
Can I, well, people won't see this, but see that big sleeping dog right there? Can I hire him? Can I put him on payroll?
You can if, let's say, you had a junkyard. People have written off the cost of their dogs.
Ah, nice.
Junkyards.
Well, I have 6 kids, so I think, do I classify as a junkyard? I mean, you should see my place.
The best of your house.
What if he's a guard dog? Can I classify him as a guard dog?
It's a slippery slope there.
What if I use him in my advertising?
Yeah, so what are you going to write off? You didn't pay him for his picture.
I got to get him groomed. He gets a haircut.
Yeah, well, you could look, in terms of taxes as a general rule, just throwing this out, anything that you could really prove is an ordinary and necessary business expense may be deductible, unless there's some rule saying you can't.
Right. So
it's possible that under the right circumstances, you may be able to write off some of the costs, but, remember, you don't go overboard.
Oh, come on. He's a cute dog.
So enjoy him for that. I couldn't be a dependent.
I want my money back from the government. I didn't ask to be partners with them. They asked to be partner with me. And
they didn't ask.
And I didn't have a choice.
That's right.
I had to say yes. A friend of mine, she does taxes. She says, I'm all for paying the government what you owe them. She says, I just don't believe in giving them a tip.
Right.
Like, amen.
Right.
So what about, when should somebody, do you help like them determine when to lease versus own, like vehicles, offices, things like that? And then, I got a question on employees too. When are they a contractor versus part-time, yada, yada?
Yeah, those are two great and very popular questions. I address both those questions in my book, J.K. Lasser's Small Business Taxes.
Okay.
Because again, these aren't black and white kind of questions. There are situations where it pays to lease, and look, it's easy to budget. You write off the lease costs, and usually with leasing a car, for example, versus buying one, you usually are able to drive a more expensive vehicle. If that's the kind of thing that matters to you and status and whatever, go for it.
Right.
But otherwise, buy it. But it's supposed to be, the tax law is supposed to be rather neutral when it comes to that situation, but it does favor leasing considerably for business owners,
right.
Not personal, just for business owners. In terms of independent contractors versus employees, this is, if I had to identify the number one issue on the mind of the IRS, is this issue. The reason being that they've done these studies about the so-called tax gap, which is the spread between what the government collects and what it thinks it should be collecting. And they've said that a great portion of that tax gap, which is $435 billion or something like that, is attributable primarily to Schedule C filers, self-employed individuals, the so-called independent contractors, who either underreport their income, they don't report everything that should be reported, they overstate their deductions, hint, hint, and or they fail to pay self-employment tax. So it's much easier for the government to collect from an employer the FICA taxes, for example, and to have the employer issue a W-2 form saying, this is your income, you better report it, rather than having individuals say, I'm an independent contractor, this is what I made, and voluntarily coming forward with that information. Now, yeah, there are 1099s issued now to independent contractors. If you work for a business and they pay you $600 or more in a year, but if you're doing work for consumers, they don't issue 1099s.
Right. Yeah, because, I mean, that's something I'm looking at. I mean, I've got a couple of web people that I use, and I pay them a flat fee every month, kind of have them on a retainer, but they do other work for other people, and then if we get a project, I'll basically sub it out. They get most of it. I basically get a sales commission. You know, I mean, when does the government say, oh, no, that's an employee versus, you know, an independent person? I mean, is the fact that they're doing their own thing proof enough?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. First of all, if they have their own business,
right?
If they're really in their own business, meaning that they hold themselves out to the public as being in business, they have other customers or clients, they treat themselves as being in business, then you're off the hook. Okay. Then it's clear they're contractors.
Right.
The shady area comes about when maybe you're taking up all of the contractor's time. Right. And maybe that's not your situation, but that could happen in other situations.
Yeah, it's so punitive. I mean, because I'm looking at it at bringing on one or two people full time, and it's good grief. The costs are so high.
The cost is anywhere from 15% to easily 50% of whatever you pay them.
Right.
Is your added cost for payroll taxes and insurance.
Right. Oh well.
And that doesn't really even count benefits. This is just the bare minimum of what you have to do, not what you're generous in doing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm generous in paying them.
In giving them work, right? In providing a job.
Right. Oh well. Don't get me off on a rant. We'll stick to sales and marketing.
Okay.
So your website, so it's Barbara Weltman, right? So BARBARA. How many people put an A in between the R and the B, huh? Some?
Most people.
All right. So BarbaraWeltman.com. So you've got a few things, right? You've got your idea of the day.
Right, which you can sign up and have it sent to you by email every morning before dawn.
let me ask you a marketing question on that, because I don't even do a daily. How do you do that? Do you go through like one day and write down 30 and have them saved up?
Yes, I do, and I don't do 30 in one day. It depends. Some days I can be just doing it the day before, or I try to have at least a week or two cushion of ideas where I do get a whole bunch together and put them down, and then my assistant posts them.
And then, do you schedule that? Because I'm big on working with people, making them make appointments with themselves. I mean, on my own calendar. I mean, I have blocks. It's like, this is my writing time. You know, my assistant knows, don't put an appointment there. That's my appointment with myself. I mean, do you block it out like that?
No, I don't. Having raised 3 children while working from home, I got very adept at managing working a business and dealing with chaos at the same time.
Right. Just get it done.
Get it done, so I just know things get done.
Right. Well, and honestly, I mean, for the first 6 years of my business, that's what I did. And, you know, in the last year or so, I've been able to kind of come up for air, and it's nice when it can happen. But although appointments will kind of spill over on the beginning, or maybe cut into the back end, backside of it. All right, so you've got your idea of the day, and you've got a monthly newsletter too, right?
I send out a monthly newsletter to subscribers, Big Ideas for Small Business, and I've been doing that more than 10 years now. And so,
where do you get your ideas?
Well, I do a lot of reading from every source you could think of, from government sources, from private sources. I hear from a lot of, because I have the newsletter and I was part of the Newsletter Association, I hear from PR people all the time telling me about new products, services, books, people, whatever. And so I'm continually on the hunt for new ideas. And so that's one of the ways I find them.
You know what? I had gotten a list of journalists years ago, and you were on it. And I had an old 914 number for you. That was in New York?
Correct.
Are you still part of that?
Nope. That is no longer.
Okay.
As of 3 months ago, no longer.
So when you moved, that was it. Life changed.
Life changed, yes. Completely. 180. Complete 180.
Very nice. So now, are you still contributing? I know you've done work with like the Wall Street Journal. I mean, you've done.
I still work with all those outlets and more. I keep hearing from new places. Recently, I started an association with Entrepreneur magazine, so I do a monthly for them now.
How does somebody?
The old editor that I used to work with at the Wall Street Journal moved over there, and
okay.
So what goes around comes around.
How does somebody break into that? I mean, how can or our typical listener has a good business, good product? How do they? Did you consciously try to penetrate that market, or was it just right place, right time because you were putting yourself out there with the book and the tax work?
I think that was it, that I was an expert in a particular field, namely small business taxes. And so I was approached. Okay. And so once you do it for one outlet, then it sort of builds on, then you have credibility and it builds on itself. I think I've been very fortunate in that I haven't had to pursue my opportunities. They've all come to me.
Right. But you became an expert in your field and produced quality work and were found because of that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's not like it wasn't luck, No,
it wasn't luck. I've been doing this more than 35 years. I mean, right. I have a track record that speaks for itself.
And how long were you doing that before you started to get published or brought into Wall Street Journal and publications like that?
Well, I was always doing writing all along throughout my career. And some things were local and some things were for smaller kinds of venues. And as I said, I would write for some small venue, and then it got I got picked up by somebody else, and that's sort of how. So I'm very. I really don't like to turn opportunities down because sure. I have found that it's some of the most unexpected connections have been made through these smaller outlets. And also, I must say that I've been very fortunate that once I make connections with people and with these outlets, they've just gone on. They've continued. So people move around. You get to work with new opportunities, but the old organizations still continue with you. So your horizons expand in that way.
But then, so like going back to that, the smaller publications in the very beginning, I mean, did you reach out to them to write an article? They came to you even in the beginning?
Pretty much I got found. I don't recall ever offering my services. I was found.
Amen.
Yep.
That's all right.
That was, yes, a remarkable thing. But again, I've been doing it for so long that right. I think I got in at the right time, too, because I was there. I was online right away. I was online very early, and I know I was found by a lot of people very early when there wasn't a lot of competition online.
Sure. Right, they say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, huh? I mean, you pulled the trigger and jumped in because I'm sure it wasn't cheap, right? 95, 96, you're getting online. I mean, it wasn't WordPress. You sit at home, buy a theme for $30, and your website's up. I mean, it was an ordeal.
I paid professionals to create a website, and then I continually did that. I've had a number of reincarnations and with my website and trying to keep it current and such. And you have to make the investments in those kinds of things to have them pay off.
So is that when the writing started? In the Wall Street Journal, whatever, did they find you because of your website, or were you already doing stuff for publications like that before then?
I wrote my first book in 92.
Okay.
And it got published it was supposed to be published by Simon & Schuster, but the contract fell through, and ultimately I went out and got an agent, and the agent shopped it and got it published by Wiley.
Okay.
And the rest is history. So once I had a first book published by a reputable publishing house, then you have credibility. When you have credibility, people listen to you, and then you get a reputation for delivery. As prompt, you keep your deadlines and such. Then everything follows from there.
Do you have any advice for people looking to get published now? Do go the self-published route, or should they go find an agent? I mean.
Yeah, I will tell you that the publishing industry has changed so dramatically. And right now, it's virtually impossible to get a good publishing house to publish you unless you can guarantee a certain number of sales. I mean, if you are associated with a big company that will buy 50,000 copies, then, okay, they'll publish it. But absent that or something extremely dramatic, they're not going to publish a trade book. I'm talking business.
Right, nonfiction.
They call it a trade book for business. On the other hand, self-publishing, just because you publish it, it's still up to you to market it.
Sure.
It's not just because if you build it, they won't necessarily come.
Right.
So I think that's an issue with self-publishing. Now, I know some people who have been successful with that. I know many people who haven't, but then they claim they're authors, and it may be good in terms of getting customers, but in terms of getting more writing or being recognized as an expert, that may not do it for you.
Right.
In terms of whether you want to do print or an ebook, my newest thing is trying this ebook venue, and I actually am co-publishing it with this publishing firm.
Nice.
So we're in a partnership, and which gives me a little more flexibility in terms of what's happening, and we'll see. This is an experiment for me. And we have two versions. We have a fixed version with a certain number of chapters, and then we have a living version where we're going to be, because it's an ebook, we
Sure.
can add to it. So we're going to be starting to add chapters, and then hopefully we'll have enough chapters by the spring, and maybe by then, maybe we will bind it into a paperback.
Very nice. So one more time, so they can get that at barbaraweltman.com?
Yes, they can see all my books and other activities.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's time for me to get Decker out for a little walk. But I appreciate you taking the time, my fellow Southerner, to speak with us here. And again, I thank you for taking the time.
Oh, it's been fun.
All right. Thank you, Barbara.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Taxes and legal entities and structures and things like that are not always the sexiest, most glamorous thing to discuss as a business owner, but they are needed as you build your business. As I mentioned before, I jumped right into the deep end, but A, that's kind of my style. B, I work from home. I'm dealing with people over the internet, over the phone. When I do training, it's at a third-party facility. I may get insurance from time to time, depending on that building. So I have different needs, different exposures. So take some time, visit Barbara's site, look at the J.K. Lasser Small Business Taxes, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Starting a Home-Based Business, and her Smooth Failing book, which is out just now. I'm recording this on September 10th, 2013. And actually this morning, my wife and I met with our tax guy. His daughter is our bookkeeper. He is our accountant. But a tip he gave us just today will save me $14,000 this year. It's a little-known tax strategy. Really, it's available to anybody with a business. Maybe I'll talk about that one day. I may have Daniel on here before too long. But you need to look at your exposure and make sure you are protected. If your exposure is limited, then go for it. But like Barbara said in the interview, If you're running a daycare, you're feeding people, running equipment, of course, you've got to have, you got to be incorporated, you've got to have maybe put up a bond, you got to have insurance, workers' comp, yada, yada. But I've been able to grow first as a sole proprietor for many years. Then I incorporated, still work with a lot of contractors. That has kept my costs low. And that really is one of the biggest reasons I've been able to maintain when times got tough and then grow, because I was not laden with debt. Live within your means. Take your time to get where you want to go. Have a longer term goal, but work like crazy to beat it. Okay? Too many people today are looking for that instant gratification. The success I've built starting the Sales Whisperer in 2006, starting with Infusionsoft in 2008, has taken time. Even Barbara talked about, she did a lot of work behind the scenes back when she started her career in writing and editing these books, and then she found her niche, she kind of found her calling, she found what she was good at, and she ran with it. But then by being super productive, she was able to get discovered, and that has become her new career. As you build your new career, make sure you are doing all that you can to protect it, because there are jerks out there that will come after and try to tear down anything you and I, as successful entrepreneurs, as doers, as optimistic individuals, producers, go out there and try to do. So you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family. Make sure you take the time to get protected from a legal and entity standpoint. And also, please take a moment to share this podcast with others. Leave a comment on the website. Leave a comment on iTunes. I appreciate it. Help spread the word and help others learn and grow with you. So thank you for listening to the Sales Whisperer podcast at www.thesaleswhisperer.com.